Alright, so in this demo, we'll be using audio to see how it leverages Devfile. So I'm starting from a very empty directory. We'll follow the classic workflow with audio where you first download the dev file and then you use it to run your application on the cluster. Now, audio is a CLI tool for running your applications on the cluster without really diving into the cloud native concepts. All right, so let's first download the audio use the dev file using audio in it. We'll select the language Go, project Go runtime. We'll use the default version. So these are the versions of dev file that are present on the dev file registry. We'll just use the default one. It's downloading the dev file. So we are now presented with the configuration of a container called runtime that is present inside our dev file. We don't want to change this configuration, so we'll just move on. Now, since I don't have any project to begin with, I'll be using the starter project that is provided by the dev file. So we'll use that. We'll use this is the name of your dev file. So we'll use the default name. Okay, so we have our dev file with us and all the necessary files. Let's quickly take a look at the dev file. We'll begin with what we know. So we'll first take a look at the metadata. This is the data about your dev file. You see the version of the Go dev file that we selected and the name of the dev file that we gave. There is a schema version, which is the version of dev file schema that you're using. So there is 2.1.0, the default one, and then there is 2.2.0. Next, we've got starter projects. So starter projects are a list of projects that you can use if you do not have a project to begin with. The next part is components. So we have a very basic container component here. It is most commonly used. You uses this image which we have defined. You can also define memory limit and memory requests. Same for CPU. You can define args and the endpoints. So our application uses 8080, and that is what we have here. Then there is this thing called mount sources. So in terms of audio, it tells audio whether it should mount the current project files into the container. So by default, it's true. And the container component is called runtime. So this name will be unique among all the components. Next, take a look at the commands. So we've got an exec command, which is used to run your command line commands. In this case, it's go build main.go, which will build a binary from our main.go. And this command will be executed inside a component runtime. You can also define environment variables you want to use while running the command. Then there is this thing called group. Now, this is usually optional, but in audio's case, it is required. So this thing keeps changing depending on the vendor of the dev file. But in any case, here it tells audio which kind of the command this is and whether it is the default one or not. So there are three other kinds of kind as well. There is build, there is run, test, deploy, and debug. So really four. You can tell what directory you want to work from. So by default, it uses the slash projects directory, which will be exported to this project source. And this one also has an ID called build, which will always be unique among all the commands. The next exec we have is a command line called uh, main. So this is the binary that we are running, which we built in our previous build command. It also runs inside container runtime, and here the kind is group. So here it is by default, it is the default command, but you can also define other commands with the kind run. Um, and we're also using the same working directory for this. All right, so next we will try to run our application on on a Kubernetes cluster that I have. Let's quickly check the status of this cluster. So this is a cluster that was created by Docker desktop, and that is what we're going to run. We'll now run audio dev, which will first create all the necessary Kubernetes resources for our application. So if you check, we have a service and a deployment. This deployment uses the container configuration that we define inside the Devfile. Once all the resources are ready, it will sync the files from your local system to your container, then run the build command, after which it runs the run command. So this execution is done in order. First you do build, then you do run. Then it waits until your application is ready to receive any requests, and then it port forwards any requests coming into port 20001 to port 8080 inside your container. So if I was to curl this command, it says hello. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly make changes to my application. So I'll change this message to hello world. I hit save, and we should soon notice that audio detected changes to the main.go file, and it is now syncing the file changes to my container, and it is running the build and run command again. So if I hit this URL again, we'll see the hello world. So uh, with the help of Devfile and audio, you don't need to dive into setting up an environment. You can simply use the Devfile to start coding and debugging and testing your application. So now that I'm done with my development environment, I'm going to hit Control C, and this will destroy all the resources that were created earlier. So you'll notice that the pod is in terminating state and the service was also deleted. We'll wait for this to clean up. But another interesting that I'd like to talk about is you can use the same dev file to run your application on Podman. So in case you do not have a cluster, you want to do a local development with Podman, you can simply run audio dev with a platform command and Podman, and it will run your application on Podman. So we'll quickly check the pod status. We see that KCD demo pod is being created. Um, Here it the pod is ready, so it will now build and execute the command. And if I run curl again, we see hello world, and it works in a similar way to the platform cluster, where if I make any changes locally, it will be synced onto the onto the podman pod. Right, so we'll hit Control C and delete the development environment that was set up on Podman. There are also many other features that you can use with audio and Devfile, but for now we'll just keep it to this.